of Chapter 16. We'll be finishing up this chapter today. It'll be a little bit on the shorter side, but there's also a video for you to watch about the history of the Keep Calm and Carry On poster. It's kind of become a cultural phenomenon, and it's something that you've probably seen out and about, but little did you know, there are actually 3 of those posters. So make sure you watch that video either before or after this video. Either of those will work. It kind of just ties in nicely with what we're talking about today. And learn some more about where that poster came from, the history behind it, and why it got so popular. So we're going to hop right in and move out of talking about the Bauhaus era and start talking about this idea of a style called the New Typography. The first person we're going to talk about in this style is a man by the name of Jan Schicholz. And his name is there on your screen because it's a doozy to spell, Jan Schicholz. So Jan Schicholz was the designer who first applied a lot of new approaches to everyday design problems. We've talked about this a lot in class and a lot with the Bauhaus, that creative problems call for creative solutions. So what that means is Jan Schicholz really took that idea to heart, and each individual creative idea that he was poised with, he came up with an individual creative answer that addressed specifically that issue. He was extremely influenced by the Bauhaus, and as you can see here, influenced as well by the Russian constructivist style, using that red, black, and white. And he attended his first Bauhaus exhibition near the beginning of his career. He quickly picked up the style and started to work in a weird mix of Russian constructivism and Bauhaus, and he would integrate this into a lot of his calligraphic work. So he wasn't working solely in typography, he was working a lot in calligraphy as well at the beginning, but eventually founded a new style that you see here called Die Neue Typography, which is basically the new typography. So a couple visual identifiers about this new typography style, specifically in the style of Jan Schicholz, is that a lot of his layouts would use kind of a textura style. They would use a textura style not necessarily in the way that the type was created, but in the way that it was laid out. It would be very, very asymmetrical, kind of haphazard as much as they could put on the screen. And he really created this revolt against any kind of style in his choices. He wanted it to be very clean, very simple, and although it did kind of become its own style, he didn't want it to look very stylized as he was designing it. Now, he laid out all these kind of instructions and guidelines in a 24-page insert called Elementary Typography. And this really demonstrated this asymmetrical typographical layout that he is so famous and well known for. Again, you can see that he's influenced here by the Russian constructivist style, using that red, black, and white, and using those very, very harsh angles, and especially the layout of the type. His new objective with this new typography was to completely wipe the slate clean and find a new asymmetrical typography design that really expressed spirit, life, and a certain sense of sensibility. Something that's very, very visually identifiable about him is that all of his headlines are always laid out to be flush left at uneven lengths. So what that means is on the left side, all of the letters that are the furthest left will line up perfectly vertically, but on the right side, it's jagged. This is something we call now left align. He didn't care about, when we looked at the vestigial style, of having everything in a block, or the classical style. He wanted to kind of lay out and pay more attention to the distance between the letters than the real distance in the columns. So he left that jagged right edge on almost all of his type. His designs were very, very much based in horizontal and vertical structures as well. A lot of his typography, especially headlines, would read bottom to top instead of reading left to right. He believed that the new essence of typography was clarity and not beauty. He didn't want it to look good, he wanted it to read well. He had a wildly successful career, but in March of 1933, the Nazi Party invaded his house, arrested him, arrested his wife, took away his kids, and he was convicted of being a cultural rebel and creating a style of art that was strictly un-German. This style was, again, going against the kind of constructivist and especially the Bauhaus style, kind of creating a new look that Germany saw as being un-German. So he was held for 6 weeks, and once he was released, he fled into Switzerland and started to work as a book designer. Here, he continued his practice of working with type, but he left this idea of the new typography. He really believed that he wanted to go back to his roots and the roots of design and really reflect a knowledge of the type masters of the past. Here we can see some of the fat face typefaces that we talked about at the top and some of the very clean sans serifs that are happening in the middle. He wanted to go back to using just the best of the best. And really what we do now is look back into history, process it through the present, and create a new future. He started working with this new traditional typography style for Penguin Books in London. He created a large series of books and kind of a format that these book titles and authors would fit into. They were all set with Penguin Books on top, the title in a large bold sans serif, and then the author in a smaller, thinner sans serif with the logo on the bottom. They were all set in this flat planes of kind of bold color, paying homage to the Russian constructivist style, but a little bit of a twist. Unfortunately, he died in 1974 in Switzerland. But just because he died doesn't mean that his legacy didn't live on. Because of this passion for new typography that he had created, there was a huge catalog of sans serif type that was created during this time. Because it was so trendy to be working in a new style, the new style of Jan Schultz, and creating those very, very clean layouts, they used almost sans serif type exclusively. So this typeface here is Gill Sans, and it was designed by a man by the name of Eric Gill. It was issued between 1928 and 1930, and this type family has 14 styles. Now, what's notable about this is that it was not made mechanically, it was made by the eye. What that means is that the proportions are different than what would be created mechanically or in a Roman traditional lettering situation. The O is a bit wider, so it's not a perfect circle. The H is a bit wider, so it's not a perfect square, and the A is kind of an augmented triangle. And this made it so that this typeface really had a kind of spiritual value to it. And Eric Gill really wanted to involve his beliefs in his type design. He believed that all type would have a spiritual value and that the artist was a real craftsman. He wanted to not make the typeface look mechanical, but have a sense of human beauty and dignity to kind of show that it was made and designed by a person and not a computer or machine. He was first commissioned to create typefaces in 1925, and his first typeface that he created was called Perpetua. This was a nod back to the Roman typefaces, unlike what he was designing with Gill Sans. He advanced the concept of this idea of having unequal line weights and of having different X and Y height in type. Another sans serif that was designed during this time was designed by a man by the name of Paul Renner. And Paul Renner created a typeface called Futura. It's wildly popular today. You'll see it. Nike uses it for all of their promotional materials. And Futura is meant to be bold and kind of punch you in the face. Futura makes you do things. Futura is known as kind of the marketing font. If they want you to do something or buy something, they'll use Futura extra bold condensed, which is showing here on this shirt. Now, Futura was introduced and it became the most widely used and popular geometric sans serif family of the time, and still to this day exists to be one of the most popular sans serif typefaces. Possibly one of the biggest inventions of that time was the invention of the typeface for the London Times, known as Times New Roman, something that you use probably on a daily basis. And it was commissioned by the Times of London and designed by a man by the name of Victor Lardent. It was designed specifically because the London Times wanted something that was extremely legible, but you could fit a lot on the page, which is probably why we use it today when you're writing your 40-page papers for your other classes. Also during this time, outside of the type that was happening, the isotype movement started to happen. Now the isotype movement we would know today as infographics. The goal of this movement is to create a kind of world language without words. Again, today it's known as an infographic. It's an information graphic. It was invented by a man by the name of Otto Neurath, and this idea of isotype stands for International System of Typographic Picture Education. So it's all about creating a pictographic representation of what is happening in the world so that people can understand instead of trying to read it, much like we looked at with ideograms back in the day when we were talking about cave drawings. So this really sought to set out a factual way to show information that was accessible to everyone, even if you didn't know how to read or look at type. So that's all for today. We're going to be moving along into some more styles and moving closer and closer to modern day. So hopefully the second half of this lecture was great and you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know, and please make sure to watch the video that I've posted about how the Keep Calm and Carry On poster was created. Have a great day. See you guys later.